So, welcome to week two. This week we're going to be talking about communication. I've uploaded three different articles for you to take a look at. One of them is about the characteristics of effective teams, because I figure no matter what discipline we are, we're working in a team with other people. So, characteristics of effective teams. Effective communication is a core competency. So, a lot of places are really zeroing in on that communication to make sure that we are communicating effectively and together as a team. And um, the last one is about communication in healthcare. Because again, I figured that we're all in the environment where we need to work together with other disciplines. So we've got those three articles, and then I uploaded statistics on US adult literacy, so you can get an idea of the statistics. I didn't want to take lecture time to do that, but there are a lot of people here in the US that um, are illiterate, meaning that they cannot read. But then there's another group that's called health illiterate. So for that, you'll want to watch the other TED Talk that's uploaded for this week. It's by Dr. Lisa. And we'll talk a little bit about that and health literacy and how that really can impact a person's care. Not only getting it, but staying with it and continuing with it. So let's get started here. So here we've got really, in very simple terms, effective communication. What is that? You've got the sender and you've got the receiver. And within that, you've got the sender that communicates, you've got the receiver that receives that communication, and then there's feedback. So in order for communication to be effective, you need to have these components. So this one is a little bit more specific. So you have a sender, which is the source of the message. They speak first. They decide what that message is. They identify that through their verbal communication, their actual words used, and the way those words are arranged. So that's the sender that's sending that out. And then you've got the message, which is what that sender put out. That's going to the receiver, where the receiver interprets the message and gives that feedback. Um, and they really are going to decide how to respond. They might exhibit nonverbal behavior. So again, the receiver is going to be exhibiting nonverbal behavior, so nonverbal cues. We'll touch up on those a little bit later. Um, and then you've got that reply. So, we all remember when we used to do that little telephone drill, and somebody would start saying one thing and you'd whisper it and see how it changed over the course of it. This really is the same thing. How that message changes from what the initial sender put out there. So it's our job to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure that we're hearing that loud and clear. And within this whole big picture, you have interference. You've got psychological interference, you've got physical interference, you've got a lot of things that can really complicate what that message is. The communication is needed to develop a relationship with your client, but as well as who you're working with. Um, if you're doing it appropriately, it's going to help to relieve anxiety. It's going to help you enhance whatever recall you're trying to get from your client, whether we're a physical therapist or a dietitian or a nurse. And then we're giving feedback. We have to be aware of any sort of noise, interference that's going on in that environment. So one of the activities and one of your assignments is to be able to identify what some of those factors might be. Okay. And just psychological. So, we've got physical, so that could be noise. That's just the actual environment. There could be, poor setup in the room. But then you've got the psychological piece. And that could be cultural, that could be ethnic. There could be other components that are not just physical that can impact effective communication. So, what do you do to establish a supportive communication climate or environment? you first want to open your remarks descriptively. You don't want to make judgments. That's one thing that, as an MI trainer, and as a practicer of motivational interviewing, that's one thing that you want to be very actively aware of, is that you're not casting judgments. So a judgment might be, well, you should have lost weight by now. I put you on a meal plan. Um, that's not going to stimulate conversation with your client. Um, it's going to cause them actually to shut down. Um, Describe situations with a problem orientation. So you want to provide an environment where you can allow for problem solving. You want to avoid pre-planned solutions. Ideally, what you want to do is provide an environment that will allow your client to come up with their own ideas for change. If you think about a situation that you've been in and you get pushed, or you feel like you're being forced into making a decision, what do you usually do? From my experience, people either push back or they fall in and say, yeah, okay, whatever. Um, Both of those things are not going to promote behavior change. So you want to really encourage and help your client figure out their own reasons for change. Um, and then once you get that back, you want to relay back to make sure you got what they were saying okay. Um, you've got to be okay sitting in silence. That's not a bad thing, because it means that, one, you're listening and processing, and two, the client is listening and processing. Um, the third thing, offer alternatives provisionally, okay, but not dogmatically. One of the aspects of motivational interviewing that's very helpful that I've found is to actually ask permission before you give advice or share ideas. Just say, I've had some clients that have gone through, some similar things that you have. Would it be okay if I shared some ideas with you? Rather than, well, your cholesterol's high, you need to stop eating Big Macs. This is what you have to do. Be empathic. Practice empathy. So we're going to watch a short little clip on the difference between empathy and sympathy in a second here. And the last part is to treat clients as equals. This is really important, that you set a team environment, that you guys are working on this together, that they're not in it alone. So I'm going to play this quick clip on. I'm going to play this quick clip so you can see the difference between empathy and sympathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives. Scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So that is empathy. Um, which we'll be talking about repeatedly over the the next few weeks. It's just such an important part of helping to establish behavior change. So, as I mentioned before, so the communication breakdown is nonverbal, you know, and the way I describe it, when I'm teaching the nutrition students is, you have your human brain and then you have your dietitian brain. And sometimes you really have to silence that dietitian brain. Um, People might say something that completely catches you off guard. You've got to be really careful not to, you know, oh, right? You've got your tone of your voice and then your words. Okay, so again, the posture, gestures, touch, the environment, the the differences that you might be working with, how we sit, how fast or how loud we talk, how much eye contact we make. Even when you're silent, you're still communicating. Um, and we have to be careful that our words match our body language. Um, because it's that unconscious body language that really throws the cues off. So that when that message goes back to the sender, you've got to figure out and make sure that you're conveying okay. Um, so again, nonverbal cues will almost always be chosen over verbal messages. Um, I think that it's also very important to um, see identify the difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is simply the act of perceiving sound by the ear. So if you are not hearing impaired, hearing simply happens. Listening, however, is something you consciously choose to do. Um, it requires concentration so that your brain processes the meanings of words and sentences. Um, Listening leads to learning. So we want our clients listening, not just hearing. Um, this is one of my favorite ways to describe it. Hearing tells you that music is playing, but listening tells you what the song is saying. There are times that we hear but forget to listen. It's listening is essential for interpersonal communication. Really concentrating on those cues. So again, active listening skills here. So there's seven key skills. Um, we will be spending time when we get to motivational interviewing talking about open ended questions, reflections, summarizing, and the type of questions to be asking. Okay, when we get to week 6, we'll be talking about that. So we are listening, setting a supportive environment, but are we reaching our clients? So now would be a good time to watch the TED Talk by Dr. Lisa. Thank you for listening.